The morning felt heavier than usual. The city was awake, loud and rushed, but inside a tall glass building near the center of town, time felt frozen. On the top floor, a man sat alone in a large office that once symbolized power and success. Now, it felt empty, almost cold. The walls were still decorated with awards and framed photos from better days, but none of them brought comfort anymore. They only reminded him of how far he had fallen. He had built everything from nothing. Years ago, he had slept in a small room with a leaking roof and dreamed of a life where money would never control his choices. He worked long nights, took risks others were afraid of, and slowly built a company that became known around the world. People admired him. Some feared him. Many wanted to be him. But success, he had learned too late, could be fragile. Now the numbers on the papers in front of him told a painful story. Losses, lawsuits, debts stacked on top of debts. Every page felt heavier than the last. His hands shook slightly as he turned them, not from age, but from exhaustion. He had not slept well in weeks. Every night, the same thoughts returned. Where did it all go wrong? Who could he still trust? The people he once called friends had stopped calling. Advisors who used to promise safety now spoke only in cold legal language. Meetings ended faster than they began. The word bankruptcy followed him everywhere, like a shadow he could not escape. On that morning, the final documents were ready. Once signed, there would be no turning back. His company would be gone. Thousands of workers would lose their jobs. His name would be remembered not for success, but for failure. The media was already waiting. He knew they would enjoy the story. Powerful man brought down? Another warning tale. He closed the folder slowly and leaned back in his chair. The room felt too quiet. He realized he could not breathe properly. The air felt thick, as if the walls were pressing in on him. For the first time in many years, he felt truly afraid. Not of losing money, but of losing meaning. He stood up and walked toward the window. Below him, people moved like tiny figures, busy with their own lives. None of them knew what was happening above their heads. None of them knew how close everything was to ending. He wondered if any of them would care. After a long moment, he grabbed his coat and left the office without telling anyone. The elevator ride down felt endless. When the doors opened, the noise of the street rushed in, sharp and real. Cars honked. People talked. Life went on. He walked without direction, his thoughts heavy. His expensive shoes touched the same pavement as everyone else's. For once, his wealth meant nothing. After a few blocks, he noticed a small cafe tucked between two old buildings. It was not a place he would normally enter. No shining signs. No long lines. Just a simple door and the smell of coffee. He stepped inside. The cafe was warm and quiet compared to the street. Soft music played in the background. A few people sat alone, staring at their phones or cups. He chose a seat near the corner, far from attention. When a server approached, he barely looked up. He ordered the cheapest drink on the menu. It felt strange, but also honest. As he waited, he placed the folder on the table. His fingers rested on it, as if touching it might change the outcome. He stared at the table, lost in thought. Memories came and went. The first office. The first big deal. The first betrayal. He remembered the warning signs he had ignored. He remembered trusting people simply because they smiled and spoke well. The drink arrived quietly. He nodded in thanks, but did not speak. The server hesitated for a second, noticing his pale face and tired eyes, then walked away. He did not notice. His attention was fixed on the folder. He opened it again. The words blurred slightly. His eyes burned. He blinked hard, refusing to let tears fall. He had always believed that strong people did not cry. But strength, he was beginning to understand, had many forms. The papers were clear. Too clear. Everything pointed toward the same ending. He had been advised to sign before the day ended. Waiting would only make things worse, they said. There was nothing left to save. He took a deep breath and reached for a pen. Across the room, someone watched him quietly. The server who had brought his drink was moving between tables, wiping surfaces and collecting empty cups. She noticed him not because he looked rich, but because he looked broken. There was a heaviness in the way he sat, the way his shoulders were pulled inward, as if he was trying to disappear. She had seen many types of people come and go. Happy ones, angry ones, lonely ones. But this was different. This was the look of someone standing at the edge of something final. She slowed her steps when she passed his table. She saw the thick folder, the serious stamps, the numbers printed in tight lines. She did not understand everything, but she understood pressure. She understood fear. Life had taught her that much. She remembered her own struggles. Long nights, missed chances, moments when one small mistake could change everything. She knew what it felt like to be unseen, unheard, and close to giving up. As she wiped the table nearby, she heard his phone buzz. He answered quietly, his voice low and tired. He spoke of deadlines, signatures, and endings. Every word felt heavy. When he hung up, his hand rested on his forehead. For a moment, he did not move at all. The pen lay beside the papers. The cafe continued its normal rhythm. Cups clinked. A door opened and closed. But at that table, something important was about to happen. The man picked up the pen again. His hand hovered above the page. He closed his eyes. He thought of the workers who trusted him. He thought of promises made and broken. He thought of the long road that brought him here. He wondered if this was punishment or simply the cost of choices. Just before the pen touched the paper, he heard a soft voice. "Excuse me." He opened his eyes slowly and looked up. The server stood there, nervous but steady. Her hands were clasped together. For a second, he felt irritation rise. He was not in the mood for conversation. But when he looked at her face, he saw something else. Concern. Real concern. "Yes," he asked quietly. She hesitated. Words felt heavy in her mouth. Who was she to speak? What if she was wrong? What if she caused trouble? But something inside her pushed her forward. "I don't mean to interrupt," she said, her voice gentle. You look like you're carrying a lot." He almost laughed. The truth of it was painful. He gave a small nod but said nothing. She glanced at the folder, then back at him. "I'm sorry," she added quickly. "I didn't read anything. I just noticed. Sometimes people miss things when they're under pressure." His brow tightened slightly. He did not understand what she meant, and he did not have the energy to ask. He thanked her politely and looked back at the papers, hoping the conversation would end. She took a step back, then stopped. Her heart beat fast. She remembered something. A detail. A lesson learned the hard way. "I know this might sound strange," she said softly, "but sometimes it helps to look twice before saying goodbye to something." The words hung in the air. He looked up again, this time more fully. For the first time that day, he really saw her. Not just a server, but a person. Someone brave enough to speak when silence was easier. He did not know it yet, but that moment, in that small cafe, was the first crack in what he believed. So was the end. The pen was still in his hand. He did not sign. He sat there for a long moment after she stepped back. The cafe noise felt distant now, like it was happening in another place. His eyes returned to the papers, but the words no longer flowed the same way. Her sentence stayed in his head. Look twice before saying goodbye. He did not know why it affected him. Advisors with sharp suits and expensive watches had spoken to him for weeks, yet a simple sentence from a stranger felt heavier than all of them combined. He placed the pen down slowly and closed the folder halfway, as if buying himself a few seconds of air. Across the counter, the server tried to focus on her work, but her hands felt clumsy. She kept replaying the moment in her mind. Maybe she had crossed a line. Maybe she should have stayed quiet. People like him did not need advice from people like her. That was what the world usually taught. But something about the papers had bothered her. She had not read them fully, but she had noticed repeated figures in a section that looked oddly placed. It reminded her of a time years ago when her family nearly lost their small home because of a mistake in a contract. Back then, no one had explained anything clearly. Everyone had assumed the outcome was final. It turned out it was. She wiped the same clean table twice without realizing it. He opened the folder again, slower this time. His eyes moved carefully over the page she had glanced at. At first, everything looked the same. Then he noticed it. A small detail. A date that did not align with another section. It was minor, almost invisible if you trusted the document completely. He felt a small tightening in his chest. He flipped to the next page, then the next. The same pattern appeared again. A quiet inconsistency. Not enough to scream danger, but enough to whisper it. His heart began to beat faster. He leaned back and looked around the cafe. His eyes landed on the server again. She was standing still now, pretending to organize cups. Her face calm, but her shoulders tense. He hesitated. Pride told him to ignore it. Fear told him not to. He raised his hand slightly. She noticed and walked over, trying to keep her expression neutral. Yes, she asked. He tapped the edge of the folder. Earlier, you said people miss things when they're under pressure? She nodded carefully. Yes. What did you mean by that? Her throat felt dry. This was the moment she had both hoped for and feared. She chose her words slowly. I don't know your situation, she said honestly. And I'm not saying there's a mistake. I just noticed something that reminded me of a problem my family once had. We almost lost everything because of one small line no one questioned. He studied her face. There was no confidence there, no desire to impress, only sincerity. Can you show me what you noticed? He asked. Her eyes widened slightly. I don't want to cause trouble, she said quickly. And I might be wrong, I understand, he replied. But right now, wrong is better than silent. She stepped closer to the table and pointed gently, careful not to touch anything. This part, she said. The date here doesn't match the condition written below. It looks small, but if one part depends on the other, it could matter. He followed her finger. His breathing slowed as his mind sharpened. She was right. It did depend on the other section. And if the date was wrong, the entire claim could be challenged. How did you know to look for that? He asked. She shrugged lightly. I learned the hard way, she said. When you don't have much, you pay attention to the small things. He felt something shift inside him. For weeks, he had felt powerless, like everything was already decided. Now, a thin thread of possibility appeared. Fragile, but real. He closed the folder completely and exhaled deeply. Thank you, he said. You may have just saved me from a very bad decision. She blinked, unsure how to respond. I hope so, she said quietly. He picked up his phone and stood up. I need to make a call. As he walked toward the door to get better reception, she watched him go, her heart racing. She had no idea what would happen next. She only knew she had done what felt right. Outside, he spoke urgently, but clearly. His voice was different now, stronger, more focused. He asked for documents to be reviewed again, for signatures to be delayed, for every detail to be checked. There was resistance on the other end. Confusion, even annoyance. But he did not back down. When he returned, he sat again, this time straighter. The folder remained closed. I've asked them to pause everything, he told her when she passed by. They weren't happy about it. She smiled slightly. Important things rarely make everyone happy, she said. He nodded. He paid for his drink and added a generous tip, though it felt less like charity and more like respect. I don't know how this will turn out, he said. But whatever happens, I'm glad you spoke. She thanked him and returned to her work, feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. The rest of the day passed slowly. The cafe filled and emptied. Conversations came and went, but both of them felt time-stretching, waiting for answers. Late in the afternoon, his phone rang again. This time, his expression changed as he listened. Surprise, then disbelief. Then, something close to relief. He looked up at the ceiling for a moment, as if holding back emotion. The mistake was real. More than real. It opened a door no one had seen before. He stood up and walked to the counter. Do you finish soon? He asked. In about an hour, she replied. "I'd like to thank you properly," he said. "Not with money, just with a conversation." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right." As he returned to his seat, she realized something important. Sometimes lives don't change with loud moments or dramatic scenes. Sometimes they change when one person chooses not to stay silent. Neither of them knew yet how far this moment would reach. But the ending he had believed in that morning was no longer certain. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to hope. He returned to the office later that evening, the cafe memory still fresh in his mind. The city outside the window was a mix of lights and shadows. Busy and alive, completely unaware of the quiet storm that had started in one small cafe. The folder of papers sat on his desk, unopened since the morning. But now he felt a spark of determination. He was tired of being passive, tired of waiting for his world to collapse. He turned on the lamp, the warm light casting a small circle on the desk. Slowly, deliberately, he opened the folder. His eyes scanned the first pages, then the second, then the third. He moved carefully, looking for what the server had pointed out. At first it seemed too small, a tiny number, barely noticeable. But then he saw it clearly. The dates didn't line up. The conditions didn't match. A clause that was supposed to lock him out of an option actually left it open. It was a flaw. A small one, but enough to make a difference. He felt a mix of relief and disbelief. Relief that there was a chance, disbelief that no one on his team had noticed. Advisors who had been paid millions, experts who were supposed to guide him, had overlooked something so simple. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. How often had he trusted them blindly? How many times had he thought that paying for experience meant getting experience? He realized now that even the smartest people could miss the obvious when under pressure. His phone rang. It was his lawyer, insisting on finalizing the bankruptcy papers. He ignored it, letting it ring out. The real work had to come first. He grabbed a notebook and began jotting down notes, marking every inconsistency he found. With each page, the sense of control returned. For weeks he had felt like a passenger on a sinking ship. Now he was steering, however cautiously. Hours passed. The sun set, the city lights grew brighter, and he barely noticed. His mind raced with possibilities. If the papers were wrong, he could stop the bankruptcy. He could save the company. He could even expose the people who had tried to force him into signing. The thought gave him energy he hadn't felt in a long time. His hands no longer shook. His mind, usually clouded with worry, became sharp and clear. Late at night, he decided to contact the cafe server. Not because he needed her help anymore, but because he wanted to thank her. The words she had spoken were not just polite advice. They were a catalyst, a spark that allowed him to see the hidden truth. He wanted her to know that her observation mattered. The next morning, he called the office team together. His voice was calm but firm. "We are reviewing every document again. Do not sign anything without my approval. Every detail matters." Staff looked at him with surprise. They were used to seeing him drained, defeated. This new energy was different, almost frightening. They nodded, unsure what had shifted but willing to follow. As the day continued, he worked methodically. Every paper, every number, every clause was examined. He even found another minor mistake, one that could have caused a severe penalty if ignored. He realized the documents had been prepared in haste, with the assumption that he would sign without careful review. It was deliberate, a trap laid by those he had once trusted. By late afternoon, he had a clearer picture. The bankruptcy was not inevitable. He could fight it. He could save the company, the employees, and his reputation. The thought brought a cautious smile. Hope, he realized, had a way of sneaking back in when least expected. He returned to the cafe that evening. The server recognized him immediately. She smiled nervously. He waved and motioned her over. "I want to thank you properly," he said. "Not just for the tip, but for opening my eyes. That small thing you noticed it changed everything." "I just said what I saw," she said. "I didn't think it would matter." "It did," he said seriously. "It reminded me to really look, instead of trusting blindly. You saved me from a mistake I might never have realized." They sat together, talking quietly. He didn't reveal all the details of the documents yet, but he spoke about the feeling of losing everything and the unexpected chance to fight back. She listened, fascinated. It was rare to hear someone so powerful speak so honestly about fear and failure. By the time he left, he felt lighter. The folder of papers was back on his desk, but now it felt like a challenge rather than a weight. The truth, once hidden, had been revealed. And with that truth, a door had opened that no one had expected. In the days that followed, he worked tirelessly. Meetings with lawyers became more strategic. Phone calls that had once caused dread now fueled planning. Every decision was weighed carefully. Every document examined twice, 3 times if necessary. The memory of the server's words lingered, a constant reminder that even small observations could have enormous impact. He began to suspect that some of the mistakes in the documents were not accidental. There were patterns, subtle but deliberate. Someone had wanted him to fail. The thought angered him, but it also motivated him. Betrayal, he realized, could either crush a person or push them to fight harder. Weeks passed. The first results were promising. Certain penalties had been avoided, and delays in signing had bought him time to organize his defenses. News of the company's potential bankruptcy had reached the media, but he remained quiet. No statements. No public appearances. The fewer people knew about the loopholes, the better. He returned to the cafe occasionally, though he rarely spoke of business. The server became a quiet presence, a reminder of vigilance and honesty. They talked about ordinary things: coffee, the city, small victories in life. Those moments grounded him, reminded him that not every problem needed a suit or contract to solve it. One afternoon, he received an email that made him pause. Attached were internal memos showing that some executives had known about the mistakes and chosen to hide them. The evidence was clear. It was deliberate, a plan to force him into bankruptcy while protecting themselves. Rage and disbelief ran through him, but he calmed himself. There was no point in letting anger cloud judgment. He had the truth now, and truth could be a powerful weapon. He printed the documents, read them carefully, and began planning the next steps. Legal action, restructuring, exposing the betrayal. Every move had to be precise. One wrong step, and he could lose everything again. As the evening came, he returned home, exhausted but alert. The weight of potential disaster had not vanished, but the paralysis had. He could act. He could fight. He could turn the tables. The folder of papers that had once represented the end now represented a beginning. It was ironic, almost poetic. The very documents meant to destroy him held the hidden truth that could save him. And a simple observation by a stranger had revealed it all. He thought back to the server again. If she had stayed silent, he would never have looked closely. He might have signed, believing the end was certain. Instead, he had found hope, direction, and a path to reclaim what he had lost. The city outside his window never slowed, never paused. People continued their lives, unaware of the quiet drama unfolding in one office. But he didn't mind. He had learned that sometimes the most important battles happen far from the public eye. In quiet moments of clarity and courage, he closed the folder, taking a deep breath. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, he felt ready. The hidden truth had been found, and with it, the chance to reclaim everything he had thought was gone forever. The following days were tense and exhausting. He spent every waking hour reviewing contracts, analyzing reports, double-checking the numbers that had once been his downfall. The city outside continued its usual rhythm, unaware of the quiet war being fought in one office, but inside. Every second felt critical. He had learned to trust his instincts again, a skill he had nearly forgotten in the haze of despair. The documents he had once feared now served as a map. Each inconsistency revealed a hidden layer of manipulation. The further he dug, the clearer it became. This was not a mistake or coincidence. Someone had deliberately tried to force him into bankruptcy. The realization brought anger, sharp and biting, but it also ignited focus and determination. He called a private meeting with his closest advisors. those he could still trust. The room was quiet, except for the sound of papers shuffling. He laid out the discrepancies he had found, explaining them slowly, pointing out deliberate gaps and misleading clauses. Some of the team's faces were pale, others shifted nervously in their chairs. It was clear they had not expected him to notice, let alone question the evidence. One senior executive, someone he had considered a mentor, tried to argue. "It's too late," the executive said, voice strained. "The filings are nearly complete. We can't undo this now." He leaned forward, his eyes steady and calm. "It's not too late. I found the mistakes. They were intentional, but we can fight this. We must fight this. Lives, jobs, and reputations are at stake. Are we going to let them destroy everything we built?" Silence filled the room for a moment. Then one by one, nods followed. They understood. The fight was not over yet. He spent hours on the phone with lawyers, preparing motions to pause the bankruptcy, gathering evidence that had been overlooked. Emails were traced, memos reviewed, and every signature examined. The documents revealed something that shocked him. A small group of insiders had known about the loopholes and intentionally tried to exploit them. The betrayal ran deep, touching those he had once trusted the most. Anger simmered, but he controlled it. Every action had to be precise. Impulsive moves would cost him everything. He was careful, deliberate, each decision measured. He remembered the small cafe and the quiet courage of the waitress who had first made him look twice. It reminded him that even the smallest observation could change everything. He would not ignore the details now. Legal motions were filed, requesting a temporary halt on all actions until a full review could be conducted. The courts responded cautiously, but the discrepancies were undeniable. The fight was gaining traction. Hope, once a fragile thing, began to grow stronger. The media, unaware of the full story, reported that the billionaire's company was still in danger. Headlines screamed potential collapse and bankruptcy, but behind the scenes, he worked tirelessly, reviewing evidence and planning his moves. Every day brought new discoveries, each one exposing more of the betrayal. It became clear that those who had tried to force him out were hiding financial documents, manipulating figures, and creating false impressions to pressure him into signing. By the end of the first week, he had assembled enough evidence to confront the betrayers. It was a tense confrontation. Faces that had once been familiar now looked guilty and defensive. Their excuses fell flat, each one contradicted by the papers he held in his hands. The betrayal was undeniable. They had acted for personal gain, not the company, and had underestimated his determination. He remained calm throughout, letting the evidence speak louder than anger. The executives realized they were cornered, their plan exposed. Some tried to negotiate, offering false apologies and promises, but he knew trust had been broken. They would not be allowed to walk away quietly. Justice in this case was necessary to protect the company and everyone who depended on it. As the legal process unfolded, he also reached out to employees, quietly assuring them that he was working to stabilize the company. Rumors and fear had spread quickly. Workers worried about their jobs, some even panicked. He spoke carefully, honest but measured, explaining that the situation was under review and that he was committed to safeguarding the company. His calm presence helped restore faith. During this time, the cafe became a small sanctuary. The waitress had become a silent observer of his journey, a reminder that courage and honesty mattered. They rarely discussed business, but her presence was grounding. Ordinary conversations about life, coffee, small victories reminded him that there was more to existence than work or betrayal. Even amidst chaos, life continued, and small moments mattered. Weeks passed. The legal team worked tirelessly, presenting evidence to the courts, countering the false claims, and gradually dismantling the lies that had been constructed against him. It was exhausting and stressful, but every small victory fueled his determination. The company began to regain footing, and employees started to feel a renewed sense of security. He discovered that the betrayals had deeper roots than he initially thought. Some partners had hidden agreements, while others had manipulated financial statements. but each revelation only strengthened his resolve. He was no longer the man on the edge of giving up. He was fighting back, carefully and deliberately, every move precise, every decision informed by evidence. One afternoon, after a particularly long meeting, he paused to reflect. The path to exposing the betrayal had been long and grueling. He had been forced to confront his own mistakes, to question his judgment, and to rediscover the value of observation and careful attention. The small voice of the waitress in the cafe had set the wheels in motion. Without that moment, he might have signed the papers and lost everything. He returned to the cafe that evening, the city lights glowing outside the window. The waitress was there, cleaning tables as usual. He waved her over. She approached cautiously, unsure of what to expect. "I want you to see something," he said, showing her the documents that had exposed the betrayal. Her eyes widened as she scanned them. She did not understand all the details, but she could see the scope of the deception. "You were right," he said quietly. "Your observation made the difference. It started everything. Without it, I might have lost everything." She smiled softly, humbled by the acknowledgement. "I just spoke up," she said. "You did the hard part by paying attention." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. It was true. Courage could be quiet, unnoticed, but its impact could be enormous. He had learned that even in a world of wealth, power, and betrayal, human observation and honesty mattered more than anything. As days turned into weeks, the company stabilized. The legal battles continued, but he was in control now. The threats had been identified, the betrayals exposed, and the employees reassured. Hope was no longer fragile. It was real, and it had roots. One evening, he sat in his office, the city lights reflecting off the glass walls. The weight that had once pressed down on him was lighter now. He could see a path forward, not just to survive, but to thrive. The betrayals had been exposed, and the lessons learned were invaluable. Trust, vigilance, and courage had made all the difference. He looked at the folder on his desk, the documents that had once symbolized the end. Now, they represented a beginning, a chance to rebuild stronger and wiser. And he knew, deep in his heart, that even the smallest acts of honesty could change the course of a life, a company, and perhaps the world around him. Months had passed since the small observation in the cafe had sparked a change that no one could have predicted. The billionaire had fought tirelessly to reclaim control of his company, to expose those who had sought to betray him, and to protect the people who depended on his decisions. Slowly, carefully, the company stabilized. The employees who had once feared the worst began to feel hope again, and the media started reporting cautiously, no longer proclaiming imminent collapse, yet amidst the recovery and legal victories, the billionaire carried a personal weight. He had seen how fragile trust could be, how quickly power could be misused, and how often people assumed the worst without seeing the truth. He thought often about the quiet waitress who had noticed something he had overlooked. He knew that without her, he might have signed the papers and ended everything he had built. Her small act of honesty had saved his company, perhaps even his life. One evening, after a long day of reviewing documents and planning the next steps, he returned to the cafe. The city's streets were calmer now, the bustle softening as night fell. The small cafe glowed warmly in the evening light. He pushed open the door and stepped inside, feeling a sense of gratitude and a little nervousness. He wasn't used to expressing feelings openly, especially to someone so ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in impact. The waitress looked up as he entered. She smiled politely, still not quite aware of the role she had played in his journey. He approached her table and asked if she had a moment. She nodded, curiosity and cautious excitement flickering across her face. "I wanted to thank you," he began. "Properly, this time. Not just a nod or a gesture, but to make sure you understand how much you helped." She looked surprised, unsure what to say. "I didn't do much," she said softly. "I just said what I saw." He shook his head. "No, you did more than that. You gave me a chance to see clearly, to act, and to save everything that mattered. Without you, I would have signed those papers and lost it all. You've changed my life, and maybe more than just mine." She blinked, humbled by his words. "I didn't realize it could be so important," she said quietly. He smiled, a gentle, rare smile. "It was, and because of that, I want to offer you a choice. I can help you in ways that could make your life easier, give you opportunities you never imagined, but you have to decide for yourself what matters most." She hesitated. Money, opportunity, a better life, they all tempted her. But she thought about the lessons she had learned about courage, honesty, and staying true to oneself. Finally, she spoke. "I appreciate it," she said, "but I want to make my own way. I want to grow, learn, and succeed on my own terms. I don't want to just be given a life." He nodded, understanding and respect shining in his eyes. "I expected nothing less," he said. "I admire your choice. That courage will take you far." Their conversation drifted to lighter topics: the cafe, the city. Simple joys that reminded them life was bigger than business battles. For the billionaire, it was grounding. For the waitress, it was inspiring. Both recognized the power of small, honest actions and how they could ripple through lives in unexpected ways. As weeks turned into months, the company continued to thrive. The insiders who had betrayed him faced legal consequences, and the truth became known to those who had doubted him. Employees regained trust, not just in the billionaire, but in the values that guided the company. They saw that honesty, courage, and attention to detail could triumph even over the most calculated deceit. The billionaire, meanwhile, learned lessons that went beyond business. He learned that humility was as important as strength, that listening to even the smallest voices could reveal truths that no advisor could teach, and that genuine human connection mattered more than wealth or reputation. He returned to the cafe often, not for advice, but for grounding. Conversations with the waitress became moments of reflection. They spoke about choices, ethics, and the small acts that could change the course of life. The world outside remained chaotic and demanding, but within those walls, clarity and honesty thrived. One day, as he sat across from her, he reflected on his journey. From the brink of collapse to the slow restoration of his life and company, he realized how fragile life could be, and how fragile people's trust could be. Yet he also saw the power of resilience, honesty, and courage. A single voice, small and quiet, had altered everything. He thanked her again, silently this time, realizing words were not always necessary. The impact of her actions had been far greater than she could imagine. He had learned that life-changing moments often came not from grand gestures, but from simple acts of awareness and honesty. As evening fell and the city lights glowed around the cafe, he stood up to leave. He turned to her one last time and said, "Remember, courage can be quiet, but its effects are enormous. Never underestimate your own power to change things." She smiled, understanding the depth of his words. "I won't forget," she said. He walked out into the night. The weight that had once pressed so heavily on him now lifted. The papers, once symbols of his near downfall, lay behind him, reminders not of failure, but of lessons learned and victories earned. The city stretched endlessly ahead, full of opportunities and challenges. But he walked with renewed purpose, a man transformed not just by the recovery of wealth or reputation, but by the humility, attention, and courage that had saved him. The journey had changed him deeply, and he knew he would never again take for granted the small voices, quiet observations, and simple honesty that could alter the course of life. Life, he realized, was not just about surviving the storm, but recognizing the quiet truths within it and using them to create a stronger, wiser, and more human future. And in that understanding, he found not just hope, but a profound sense of peace. Months had passed since the company had stabilized, and life had begun to regain a sense of normalcy. The billionaire had rebuilt much of what he had almost lost, but he knew better than anyone that success was never permanent. It required constant attention, vigilance, and humility. He often reflected on the events that had brought him back from the brink, thinking of the small cafe, the quiet waitress, and the hidden truths and documents that almost ended everything. One morning, as he walked into his office, he noticed an envelope on his desk that had not been there before. It was unmarked, no return address, nothing that could immediately identify its sender. Curiosity mixed with caution as he opened it carefully. Inside were a few sheets of paper, typed and precise. They contained information that made his eyes widen. The documents revealed that despite his efforts, a new threat had emerged. A hidden partner in the company, one he had never fully trusted, had been manipulating investments quietly for months. Small amounts had been siphoned off, unnoticed at first, but over time the sum was significant. It was enough to potentially destabilize the company again if left unchecked. He felt a chill run down his spine. He called his legal and financial team immediately, summoning them to the office. "We have a new issue," he said, keeping his voice steady, though his mind raced. "This is deliberate. Someone has been hiding financial moves for months. We need to uncover it, and we need to act fast." The team worked tirelessly, combing through months of transactions, contracts, and communications. Every discovery revealed how cleverly the hidden partner had operated, taking advantage of trust and exploiting small gaps. It was frustrating, exhausting work, but necessary. Every move they uncovered brought them closer to stopping the threat. During this time, he continued his visits to the cafe, though now less often. He still found comfort in the ordinary life and quiet presence of the waitress, a reminder of vigilance and honesty. One afternoon, he shared the new challenge with her, careful not to burden her, but to explain how small actions could prevent large disasters. "I never thought this would happen again," he said quietly. "It's incredible how much impact a single person can have, both positive and negative." She listened intently. "People often assume someone else is watching," she said, "but sometimes you have to pay attention yourself. You've learned that the hard way." He nodded, grateful for her insight. It reminded him that no matter how much one had learned, life would continue to present challenges. And the real test was not avoiding them, but responding wisely. Weeks turned into months. The investigations revealed the full scope of the hidden partner's actions. The amounts were larger than initially feared, but the evidence was clear. The partner had acted deliberately, but they had also underestimated his vigilance. Every move had been tracked, every irregularity documented. He now had the proof needed to act decisively. He arranged a confidential meeting with the partner, one that would decide the future of the company. Sitting across the table, he remained calm, his demeanor steady, his words measured. The partner tried to deflect, to minimize the wrongdoing, but the documents told a different story. The evidence was undeniable, the betrayal exposed. By the end of the meeting, the partner realized there was no escape. Legal and financial measures were taken immediately to protect the company and its employees. The billionaire felt a mix of relief and satisfaction, tempered by the reminder that trust must always be earned and vigilance maintained. Throughout this period, he also took time to reflect on his own role. The series of crises had taught him humility and the importance of attention to detail. He realized that even the smallest oversight could have massive consequences. He committed himself to maintaining vigilance, learning from every mistake, and cultivating a culture of honesty and accountability within the company. The cafe remained a sanctuary for him. He spent quiet moments there thinking, planning, and appreciating the small victories. The waitress continued her work, embodying the same honesty and courage that had changed his life. Their conversations, simple and grounding, reminded him that success was not just about wealth or power, but about the people and principles that guided one's choices. One evening, after a particularly long day, he walked through the city streets reflecting on the journey. From near collapse to recovery, and now to facing hidden threats, he understood that life was unpredictable. But he had learned to face challenges with clarity, courage, and attention to detail. The lessons from the small cafe, the quiet waitress, and the hidden truths had become ingrained in him. He returned to his office looking at the skyline. The city was alive, bustling with endless possibilities. He knew that future challenges would come, that the business world was unpredictable, that betrayal or mistakes could occur again. But he was prepared, grounded in the knowledge that small observations, honesty, and courage could shape outcomes in ways that wealth or authority alone could not. As he sat quietly, he felt a sense of peace. The company was stable, the betrayals exposed, and lessons learned. He understood that life was a series of challenges, some expected, some hidden, but all manageable with the right mindset and attention. And so, with renewed vigilance and the memory of small but powerful acts guiding him, he embraced the journey ahead. Every decision, every observation, every choice mattered. He had been tested, nearly lost everything, and yet he had found strength in unexpected ways. Life continued, and he would continue to face it, wiser, stronger, and ever attentive to the quiet truths that could change everything.